Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Because there's some like assholes in the comments that think I grew up like the Huxtables. Know what I'm saying? I don't know what the fuck is wrong with these people, but and coming from where we come from, it's a beautiful thing to have both of your parents.
Yeah,
I know in rap they see all these people. Yeah, we had both of our parents. Do that mean we wasn't in the street? No. Do that mean our household we had gold spoons? No. My mom's did. She bust her ass. My pops was on drugs. He was able to shake back. I was outside doing shit. I was smart in school. I was athletic, but I was outside. Just ask the people. Just ask the cops. Just ask any fucking body you want to ask. For some reason, these people you can't be standing up to your word if you have both of your parents. Are you some type of asshole? It's a blessing to have both of your parents if you can have both of your parents.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I want to thank you all for tuning in as you do each and every week. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is the struggle. Now, you just heard a clip there from the rapper Jadakiss. You know Jadakiss from his time with the group The Lox, as well as his time as a solo artist. And what he was talking about, he was on a podcast a couple of months ago. I think it was it Fat Joe? It was Fat Joe and Jadakiss's podcast. I think it's called Fat Joe and Jadakiss. And he was talking about, the struggle, or more specifically, like how we as Black people go through a struggle or what have you. And I think on one particular episode of their podcast, Jadakiss's dad was on the podcast and he got interviewed by the two of them. And, he made a comment, his dad made a comment that said something and I'm paraphrasing here, like, he didn't grow up poor. Like, he went to school and, his parents were together and, they did certain things together and they were a family, and he came from a 2-parent household. So, and I don't really know that I've ever heard Jadakiss talk about, growing up rough or anything like that. But I know Jadakiss is from Yonkers. Yonkers isn't a place that is, to be trifled with, if you will. It's not necessarily an easy place to live. But, I think the thing that Jadakiss really was trying to say there was that, he talked about, or he was trying to dismiss the notion that even though he came from, a 2-parent household, he was still in the streets and running the streets. And you know what? I don't know Jadakiss personally, so I will take him for his word. He doesn't strike me as a man that would tell a lie for 30 years. But that being said, it got me to thinking about, like, a lot of times, particularly with athletes and entertainers, the story or the narrative surrounding their rise to stardom or fame is pushed by the fact that they came up on hard times, and they were either in these poor neighborhoods, or they were in Section 8 housing, or they were homeless, or they were in gangs, or the cousins got shot, or they got shot at, just these very tough times. And it's not to dismiss the idea that it did not happen, because unfortunately that has been life for a lot of young Black people. That being said, we're not all a monolith. We all didn't grow up in gang infested neighborhoods. We all didn't grow up on the poverty side. And one of the things that I had a conversation with my sons, I have 3 sons, at the time of this recording, age 26, 23, and 18. And I told him, like, you know, I said it in jest, but I meant it. Like, don't ever tell anybody that you struggle. Like, don't ever tell anybody you got it out the mud. All these other colloquialisms that, I'm getting tongue tied. Colloquialisms, words. Don't ever use words to describe a life that you did not live. Because no, you didn't get it out the mud. No, you didn't come up hard. No, you didn't have a struggle. You came from a 2-parent household of 2 parents who did, if you compare it to society, did pretty good for themselves. We're not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but we're not the Cosbys either. And nor are we the Evans from Good Times. But the thing is that my wife and I worked hard to give our children a life that we wanted, that we talked and dreamed about when we were in college at South Carolina State University and we were dating. We talked, and we talked about our dreams and the kind of life that we would want our children to live. And subsequently, they've lived those lives, and we want them to keep going and keep growing. And, we want them to get married at some point, get off the payroll, and, God willing, they'll have kids when they get married down the road, and, create even bigger lifestyles for, our future grandchildren and great grandchildren. But no, it wasn't a struggle. It was a struggle, but it wasn't like the struggle that you would think. And I can only speak for me. My struggle is different from everybody else's struggle because very few people walk the path that I walked. It wasn't an easy path, but the thing is that the thing that I tell my kids all the time, anything that you want, you're going to have to work for it because nobody's going to give you anything. And deep down, you really should want to work for what you get because it's that much more rewarding in the end. Now, would I have loved to have been a trust fund baby and have millions and millions of dollars passed on to me? Yeah. But I have to ask myself too, if that had happened, would I have gone to South Carolina State and worked as hard as I did to get my degree? Probably not. Hell, I don't even know if I would have even gone to college, if we're being honest. But no, the struggle was different. It wasn't the, grew up on the crime side, the New York Times side, staying alive was no jive. It wasn't that type of struggle. But I think what Jadakiss was speaking to was kind of a mentality that we kind of have, some of us have heard and then subsequently portrayed in the Black community that, we all come from rough and tumble areas. No, we don't. But the ones that do, I think, should definitely be celebrated. We all should be celebrated, but I think you really got to celebrate those who, come up on the rougher side and make it, because it's a little bit, it's while life is hard, it's a little bit harder for them. I tell you guys have heard these guys on the podcast several times. Uncle Dolomite from the Too Much Game podcast, and my boy Baylor, BTG for President, on the podcast. Both are LA kids, born and raised. And, I tell them all the time, like, tell your stories, because, and they do a great job of telling their stories as to how they grew up, not necessarily trying to promote any type of lifestyle or anything like that, but like, your experiences have made you who you are in spite of, what obstacles were thrown in your way. You made it. Like, I mean, Uncle Dolomite's a member of the Nutty Block Crip. That's a notorious gang in Compton, if you didn't know. And for somebody to come from Nutty Block to be where he is today, that's a success story. You should tell that story because that is an amazing story. That is really and truly the American dream. Conversely, I didn't grow up like that. But I think sometimes we have people who will highlight, the people who have not necessarily been through a struggle like what you may think, and then say, okay, well, hey, this is how it is for Black people. And if you didn't grow up like this, then, you were the Cosbys or you were privileged. Listen, I'll be the first to admit, no, I'm not from a neighborhood where it was drug infested or anything. You can ask anybody from my city in Florence, South Carolina. I came from the neighborhood that I grew up in was probably one of the most privileged places that you could be. We had a pool in our backyard and a long driveway where we had, enough space to play 4-on-4 in the basketball. We had a basketball goal and we had a driveway big enough for us to play 4-on-4 in a driveway. So, we weren't necessarily in the hood, not even the rap hood. We weren't even hood adjacent. But, the struggle that I think I had and the struggle that people around me had were different struggles. And it's a beautiful struggle if you look at it the way that you probably should, because at the end of the day, it's about having the mindset to want something better. Not necessarily better as far as material possessions, but wanting to do something bigger than what you see that's in front of you. I'm from a very small place, relatively speaking. There's probably more people that live in the city that I live in now, right outside of Atlanta, than in my hometown of Florence, South Carolina. And so because I'm from a small place, I never had the small town mentality. I never had the mentality of, well, this is all that I know. This is where I'm going to be. And I've seen that from people from New York City to Florence, South Carolina. Like, no, you don't have to be where you are. And it's really not about where you are. It's what's in you. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. If you want a podcast where culture, conversation, and life collide, where you get insightful commentary, engaging discussions, and a fresh perspective on everything, then you need to listen to the 12 Kyle podcast, hosted by the one and only, yours truly, 12 Kyle, a voice that you know and trust. This podcast will bring you thought-provoking moments, compelling stories, and a whole lot of fun. Whether you're a first-time listener or just tuning in, each episode promises to be something new and exciting. So sit back, relax, join 12 Kyle, myself, and my guests as we break down the world around us and give you stories that you've never heard before, from nostalgic throwbacks to everything in between. The 12 Kyle podcast is a front row seat to this conversation. Subscribe now and never miss an episode of the 12 Kyle podcast, where the vibe is always real and the discussion is always worth your time. And so everybody's struggle is different. Some people struggle in school, right? And for others, school comes very easy. I was having a conversation with our daughter the other day, and I was explaining to her, like, math was very easy for me when I was in 6th grade because it was just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. By the time I got to middle school, when you get to algebra and it's A plus B equals C, I didn't understand that shit. And it still, to this day, doesn't make any sense to me. And my daughter looked at me with amazement, like, my dad is very smart, but why doesn't he understand math? And because it doesn't make any sense to me. And I didn't want to tell her this, but like all of this geometry stuff you're looking at, you'll never see this stuff again. I didn't want to tell her that, but it's true. She's never going to see it again unless she decides to be an engineer or something like that. I don't think she's going to be an engineer. But the thing that I tried to impress upon my sons when I was having that conversation is that, no, don't tell people that, don't mimic or say something that you heard some rapper say on a video, because your favorite rapper may have, had to trap his way out of his neighborhood, had to sell drugs, had to, rob people to get where he is today. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I do find it funny that Almost every rapper has the same story these days. They sold dope, they hustled to get to where they are, and they were doing this, they were doing that. I mean, everybody can't have the same story. And I mean, given the fact that at one point in time in my life, I did kind of dabble in the music industry, and I did have someone at a record label tell an artist that I was working with that he should lean in on his story of how he grew up, and he should surround his raps around how he grew up. And this guy, who's going to remain nameless, wasn't a street dude at all. Now, granted, he was from New York, he was from the Bronx, he's from the Boogie Down, but he wasn't like, he wasn't that guy. He was the guy that probably was inside the house a lot. He wasn't in the streets getting into trouble, doing things. And again, what is that to celebrate? I mean, some people do certain things. Some people hustle, some people steal, some people rob, and they do it to survive. Others do it because they ain't got nothing else to do. Or at least they tell themselves they don't have anything else to do, which is crazy to me. But again, you can't paint that picture for Black people. I won't allow you to, because I'm Black and I understand that we all have different experiences. We have different experiences. And again, I'm someone who grew up in the South. We have different experiences from Black people all across the country. So while there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences too. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there weren't people that didn't struggle in my little hometown. But at the same time, the struggle is different. Nobody was ducking bullets. Nobody was, worried about, at least not where I'm from. Nobody's worried about somebody running up in their house. I mean, I marvel at the fact that the house that I grew up in, like, there was no security. I mean, like, I remember times where we would literally go out the house, leave the door open, and go out of town, and the door would still be open. I mean, unlocked, I should say, not open. But I mean, like, we weren't ever worried about anybody running up in our crib, because that's not how it was where we lived. And on my street, like, you knew somebody when they came on the street, because there's just one street. So in my neighborhood, so it's just one street, and everybody on the street, got something. So they weren't, you just couldn't just come over there and just people not know who you were. And so, like I said, very privileged area, not rich, not wealthy by any stretch of imagination, but comparatively speaking, middle class, working middle class, a little bit higher middle class for some. So yeah, the struggle wasn't like that. The struggle was different, and everybody's struggle is different. And some people have struggles that we know nothing about. So I get a little annoyed when I hear Black people in particular talk as if like we all have the same struggle. We don't. I didn't have the same struggle as Baylor. I love the fact that Baylor became who Baylor is because of what he went through. And he didn't fall by the wayside, which he could have. And I'm pretty sure, Baylor did what he had to do, but he probably knows about 15 other dudes that had the same opportunities that he did, and they went the other way. Same for Uncle Dolomite. Same for King Germ. We all, and I'm just talking about podcasters, but I could even go to my friends who I grew up with, or my friends who from college. Everybody has a story as to how they got where they are. I'm almost, I get kind of turned off by watching like the NBA draft or the NFL draft, and you see the guy comes up and he gets drafted and he's hugging the commissioner and he's happy and everything. And then they go into this story. Oh yeah, well, he grew up without a mother, without a father. They were homeless. They were taken up by ICE. And this was like in 85, and they were taken up by, like, the story is just like so grandiose. And I'm not saying that everybody doesn't have some type of struggle or hardship. Not saying that at all. But some of this stuff is made up for TV. Some of this stuff is made up for radio. Some of this stuff is made up for records. And I don't think that we're being totally honest with the other people. And the thing that I don't want to happen is I don't want other Black people to see that and feel any type of way or feel less than because you did. Should I feel, less than because my parents were together until I was, 14 years old. And while I am, not necessarily happy that they got divorced, but, I know I have friends who have, no idea who their fathers are or fathers. I got a friend who his father never saw him play a down of football ever. And he was dope at football. He played football at South Carolina State with me. He said his dad lived on the other side of town and never even acknowledged the fact that that was his son. And he knows that he got his athleticism from his dad, but his dad, chose to chase other women, chose to not take care of his responsibility, and never, went to go see him play one game when he was in high school or at South Carolina State University. And so that type of struggle is different. And so those things kind of help mold us into who we are. But no, we're not all the same. We don't have the same struggle. And Jadakiss, there's nothing wrong with coming from a two-parent household. You should want everything for your children. And there's a lot of stuff that I got as a child from both my parents and my relatives and everybody. And I'm so thankful for it. But there's also some things that I would have liked to have gotten that I didn't get. And those things that I'm getting now in life as an adult, I'm trying to make sure that I pass on to my kids and make sure that they understand, like, hey, this is cool. It's okay to have this. This is nice. This is something fly. I tell people all the time, like, I buy Air Jordans now. I couldn't afford Air Jordans when I was growing up. I couldn't. So I didn't get my first pair of Air Jordans until like I was in college, and I had to run a sneaker scheme to get those. I'll tell you all about that later. Hold on, statute of limitations up. Okay, we can talk about it, but we're not going to talk about it in this episode. But yeah, as big a fan as I am of Michael Jordan, I never owned a pair of Jordans up until the time that I got to college. But me purchasing my first pair, that didn't happen until I was probably about 23, 24 years old. So, and now I can afford Jordans. So yeah, when I see the Cement 3s, I'm going to buy them because I wanted them as a kid in '88 and I couldn't afford them. They were $100. My mom was like, she wasn't spending $100. She was like, these shoes right here cost $20. You can get these right here, and they look just as good as those Jordans. No, they don't. In conclusion, everybody has a struggle. Everybody, and a lot of us are still struggling with certain things, and we don't always necessarily talk about it. But the thing that I want people to understand is that, again, we're not a monolith. We are a very diverse group of people. We come in all different shapes, sizes, various means of intellect. We're very innovative, and we all have seen different things. Because you travel one certain path doesn't mean that my path is less. Because I've traveled a certain path doesn't mean that your path is any worse. But the struggle is real. We all struggle with something. I think the biggest thing is understanding what it is that you struggle with and then overcoming that struggle. And it's okay to share your experiences. Just don't lie and make people feel bad about the fact that they didn't have the same struggle that you did, because they just may have. They just didn't tell the world about it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We drop new episodes every Thursday, every Sunday. If you're on YouTube, check us out, subscribe, like, and share this episode. Also, we have a new baby. It's called the Rap Soul Podcast. It is the intersection where we have discussions about hip hop, rap, soul, and R&B when it comes to artists from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. Simply put, folks, it's the best music podcast that you've never heard, so make sure that you check it out. Also, we have merch. If you'd like to contribute to the podcast, go purchase yourself some merch. Look in the description box. Check the link that says merch, and there you can get 12 Kyle Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as coffee mugs. We got it for the low. Also, if you'd like to donate to the show, hit us up on Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. Again, that's going to do it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheer.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle Podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle Podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.